morning, out to sea. Let's talk about HPPD a little bit, or Hallucinogen Persisting Perception Disorder. Now, when I was a kid, we just called it being Perma-Fried. Taking a bit too much L, gone a little sideways, you're permanently affected. It was Perma-Fried. Now, I'm 43. I started taking LSD back in like 1995. I was around 14, 15 years old. And I'm not going to go into my entire drug-a-log because I've got a lot of videos talking about my extensive experience with LSD, ibogaine, ayahuasca. I used to forage the psilocybin cyanescens out of the Pacific Northwest. I've eaten a whole lot of psychedelic fungus. I've done all kinds of weird stuff, the 2CI, the 2CB, different forms of DMT, venomous frogs. I'm seasoned, right? I've been through the gamut. But talking about LSD in particular, I've had a couple experiences that have definitely stuck with me and I think would certify me as having HPPD. Now there's some pretty good information. The Wikipedia page has some decent information on HPPD. I just looked at it again last night and I hadn't looked at it in a while, and there's definitely new information. If you haven't watched any of my videos, you can go back and see my experiences with LSD. I got wrapped up with Cats Off a Dead tour after Jerry Garcia passed in '95. I got, tackled by the DEA on the street selling 2,500 hits of Schwamber to a federal informant. I've been puddled. I was dealing with L. There was a lot of it around, so I was fed large amounts. I was spilling it on myself. So I've probably done more L than most people ever see in their lives. And, that's not me like flexing. That's just the truth, man. I've been deeply seasoned. So, and I guess let's preface this talk a little bit with a quote from the great Alexander Shulgin, Sasha Shulgin, rest in peace, the psychedelic chemist and author. In regards to taking psychedelics, he was quoted as saying, "Sometimes you bend things that don't want to unbend." And you got to be careful what you wish for, man. I went out wanting to alter my perception, and you just might get that, baby, and maybe a little bit more than you bargained for. So you got to be careful what you wish for, right? When we're playing around with these powerful compounds, they can affect you permanently. There's this kind of idea that psychedelics are harmless and, excuse me, now nothing but medicinal. I find that totally false. They're tools, and like with any tool, they can do good or harm. So, HPPD, again, as a kid, I knew it as just being Perma-Fried, but it turns out that HPPD was introduced under the diagnosis post-hallucinogen perception disorder in 1987 within the DSM-3. Now the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. You go to a psychiatrist, they're basically going to listen to what you say and connect the dots in the DSM and say, oh, you have this, and toss some shitty meds at you. And the DSM-4 then recognized the syndrome as hallucinogen persisting perception disorder. HPPD is currently in the DSM-5 diagnosis. There's now two forms of it. There's HPPD-1 and HPPD-2. The first one is generally less severe and happens periodically, where the second form is more severe and constant. And that's definitely what I have. It's constant, and I've had to learn how to live with it. So, you look online and HPPD talks about the visual distortions that don't go away. And I guess a lot of people report like snow, kind of like snow on old school television. That's not what I have. You know, nothing is inanimate. Everything is brimming over with life. You know, wooden tables, the floor, the walls, asphalt, the denim of my jeans, you know, everything flows with life. And if I sit and focus and just look at a particular color for a little while, I will start to see the primary colors that color is built of bleed out. You know, definitely when I got dosed when I was 16 years old with a massive puddle, and I've got a video about that, the lore of fingerprints and puddles that goes into that whole experience, that changed me. And my friends told me that it changed me. You know, I thought I died and been reborn. I don't know how much I took, but it was a whole lot, dog. A whole lot. And after that, I guess I began repeating myself. I'd tell a story, I'd be excited about something, I'd tell a story, and people would be listening, yeah, cool, you know, and then I'd start repeating the same story not too long after that. And my good buddy told me, like, dude, Ian, like, ever since you got puddled, you repeat yourself, dog. And it took me a while to recognize it. I still recognize it to this day. I'm 43 now, and that's a side effect, you know, that I would consider to be a part of this HPPD. Now, another interesting thing, I remember when I was a kid and we first started getting into the L, and you know, I'm talking about old school American-made LSD, made by chemists all over the US that was traveling around with the Dead Tour. So I'm talking about old school L. You know, the stuff that's going around now, I have no idea what this stuff is, man. There's all types of analogs now. There's all types of weird stuff. You know, I used to look forward to the drugs of the future when I was still taking drugs. And now it's like, man, this new stuff sucks, dog. This stuff is terrible. It's just analogs of the original stuff and usually more toxic and just weird. So I'm talking about old school L. When you go to the drugsdata.com website, there are some recent submissions of LSD blotter that it's coming up as real L. I think a lot of it's coming from India and China now and basically trafficked off the web. It's not what it used to be, but things evolve, right? But anyways, there was a myth that was going around when I was a kid that once you take LSD 7 times or up, you're considered permanently insane. I don't know where that myth came from, but in retrospect, it's like, might be something to that, you know, because I remember the first several, you know, dozen times I took L with my friends. It was a social thing. We're kicking it, you know, running the streets of Seattle aimlessly, grilled on hits of white fluff, amber, silver, or whatever we were getting. And at first it was just fun, you know, sometimes one of us would freak out and it would be difficult, but we had each other's backs. But it was never anything more than patterns and standard acid trip. There was nothing spiritual or emotional about it, but it was after I took it many times that it evolved into something else, and it was like, this isn't getting high, you know? I feel like I'm having this emotional and spiritual response to where I feel like I'm learning about myself and the very nature of this reality. And it was as though I'd found a secret portal through a magical treasure chest that made the world colorful and beautiful and scary, and it wasn't either or, it's both and. You know, I started tripping by myself a lot, and I was journeying, you know. I don't know if I was trying to escape or find something, a little bit of both probably, but it was after I took LSD many times, it evolved from just getting high with friends into something I perceived as deeper. So who knows what's up with that, you know? So yeah, you know, I have visual stuff that I've gotten so used to, I kind of forget about it. Something that will trigger, kind of take me back to like I'm full on tripping on some L is if I'm in nature and wind is blowing through trees. You know, when the sound of wind blowing through large trees occurs and I see the leaves and everything kind of dancing around, that will take me back to when I got puddled really hard. And it's not necessarily unpleasant. You know, a lot of times when I'm struggling with life and society, I want to go out into nature. It helps center me and calm me. And something about wind blowing through trees just takes me back. I feel as though I'm hypersensitive. You know, and that's a double-edged sword. That hypersensitivity allows me to have deep empathy for all living creatures. My experiences with LSD have made me more or less vegetarian, because it's like, do I need to kill this living creature to nourish myself? I'm sensitive to that level. It helps me with music, art, you know, I'm able to be very gentle. But on the flip side of that hypersensitivity, I also absorb the terror of the world, you know, the agony and the terror and the horrors of the world. Like, for example, I'm driving down the street and I see a possum or a raccoon that's been run over and it's dead and bloodied on the side of the road. My mind will play out the whole reality of me being that animal and having been born and in nature all the way to the point of running into the road and getting mowed down by a truck, and that blink of life to death. And that's unsettling at times. That's just one example. You know, I'm deeply sensitive. If I immerse myself in like the news and look into all the horrific things happening all over the world, I feel it. And it's overwhelming. And so getting overwhelmed, you know, that's anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, that's the symptoms of the HPPD I have. Now, I've had to do a lot of things, you know, in order to continue functioning on a semi-normal level in society, because sometimes these symptoms of HPPD, being overwhelmed, the anxiety, they pop up at the most inopportune times. Times of stress, or times when I'm in a new environment, learning, and it's a little uneasy, starting a new job, going to college, things such as that are important for moving along in life and succeeding. I feel like getting printed out with all the L and everything else I've done makes things like that a little bit more difficult. Now, when you look at, I've gone to psychiatrists and I've told them about what happened with the massive L doses, and that I think I have HPPD and it makes life difficult sometimes. Up until pretty recently, there were two main drugs that a psychiatrist would give you. One is clonazepam, super powerful benzo that's absurdly dangerous, and I don't do good with that. I abuse it, so I don't take that. Some of the worst trouble I've gotten myself into has been with benzodiazepines. However, it works. The Klonopin works. It definitely dulls like the hypersensitivity. It definitely dulls the constant sparkling, and I don't see primary colors bleed out of the color I'm looking at quite as much. It kind of takes me back to a place of normalcy. Lamotrigine is another drug. It's like an anticonvulsant. You know, these drugs have major side effects, right? Now apparently clonidine is something that is sometimes prescribed that lowers your blood pressure. They give you that when you're in rehab coming off of opiates to try to chill you out a little bit. Gabapentin, that's something that I don't know the function of it really, but I know it can be addictive and have serious side effects. I would take that when I was withdrawing from heroin, and it actually reduced withdrawals by quite a lot, but it gave me chest pain too, so it's like, oh, that's not good, dog. And then there's also hardcore antipsychotics that will sometimes be prescribed, such as Risperdal and Abilify. You know, these are not gentle drugs. So, you know, it's like psychedelics are unpredictable at best. You don't know what the hell is going to happen when you take this stuff. And I think it's the same thing with the vast majority of these psychiatric drugs. Unpredictable at best. And these psychiatrists, you know, don't know what the hell they're doing. You're going to talk to them a little bit, say this and that, and they're going to look at the DSM and connect a couple dots. Try this. You know, you're just a straight fucking guinea pig, man. Not that they're trying to do harm necessarily, but we know ourselves best. So you got to be really careful dealing with psychiatrists. They're not really there to talk to you. They're there to prescribe you hardcore psychiatric drugs. Now, I've been in and out of talk therapy for years, and I've found that to be quite beneficial. I've gotten really lucky and have found a couple therapists who listen to me, and just being listened to is soothing, right? Someone who actually cares. You know, I've had some therapists that sucked, and I can tell they didn't care, but I've had a couple that were awesome. And one particular woman, I really went into all these experiences I've had with LSD and the drugs. You know, at the time I was on Suboxone, so I got the therapist at that time. And when I told her everything I've been through regarding the LSD and everything, she told me that she thinks I must have a very strong mind to even still be sitting here somewhat sane. You know, albeit I've had a lot of struggles in my life. And I'm very fortunate to be where I am. But it's not been easy. So I mean, I started taking these things so young that it's difficult for me to think back to what was it like before the LSD and what's it like after. You know, I started taking this stuff when I was like 15, 16. I was developing. So I've had to live with this my whole life. You know, I'm 43 now. I haven't taken any psychedelics since 2019. The last time I took anything was like an eighth of Q-Benzies after I detoxed from buprenorphine to try to get a little cleanse. And it was a nice experience. I put on a Stevie Wonder record, and it was good. I haven't taken LSD since probably like 2018, but from the time I was 16 up until like 37, 38, I was pretty consistently always taking something, you know. So I mean, I've done a lot more than just LSD. So it's hard to say, right? What was my life like before and after? Because this is just what I know and remember. So in that way, it might make it a little easier for me in that I developed being seasoned with L, as opposed to being older and having had an established life and having a psychedelic event occur that changes me. But, you know, a lot of the people that were wrapped up in the L world when I was younger, coming off Dead Tour, hippie ballers, you know, getting grams of L for $3,000 and doubling their money, making real cash, you know, just living a nomadic lifestyle, living out of a van, a bus, moving around, you know, following tours, just grinding out L. A lot of these cats were strung out on narcotics. You know, the connect I had going down to the Bay, getting all the L, he was a speedball addict, man. He loved heroin and cocaine. So I was introduced to these drugs at a young age. You know, everyone I knew who was like family, hustling out a lot of L, most of them got strung out on heroin. And I don't think that's a coincidence. You know, when you've been printed, when you've taken these massive amounts of L and nothing is ever inanimate, and you're always like the veil has been pulled away, it gets overwhelming. And especially when you're living a life where there's a lot of paranoia and uncertainty. You know, today could be the day I get popped by the feds and gotta roll over on a bunch of people or go to prison or whatever it is that happens, right? Heroin has been a part of the L scene for a long time, and heroin and opiates soothe the HPPD very effectively. You know, heroin isn't listed as a prescribed medication to treat HPPD in the DSM-5, but let me tell you, man, it fucking works, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the vast majority of us who came off the tail end of all the Dead Tour L ended up struggling with heroin and other opiates, became full-blown junkies, man. You know, there's this idea that LSD and psychedelics can help reverse addiction, treat addiction. That has not been the case I've seen, man. Not in my context of wiling out, crazy fam, puddling, and Prince. You know, I am not coming from the context of I'm 30 years old and found some therapist in the Bay Area that I can give $400 to that's going to give me like 150 mics of L and sit with me. You know, those situations could very well be beneficial. But even then, you know, I think Ken Kesey was interviewed once, and he was asked if he felt like LSD did long-term damage, something like that. And he said, everything leaves a bruise. I think there's a lot of wisdom in there. So yeah, it's something that I've had to learn how to live with, and it makes daily life difficult at times. You know, the HPPD has led me to opiate and sedative addiction, and that's something I've struggled with for a long time, because it's like, I don't want to be a drug addict. I don't want to be dependent on opiates or benzodiazepines. But the way that they just soothe things and can just breathe for a minute, you know, there's like a tension that comes with the HPPD. There's kind of a bit of a, it's not gentle or calm at all, you know. It's like kind of always like on guard, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, yeah, I'm able to find beauty in everything, but there's a lot of ugly too, right? A lot of ugly, a lot of beauty. So man, yeah, if any of you have any experiences with HPPD, aka being Perma-Fried, you'd like to share, you know, I'd love to hear about it. If it's something that you've been struggling with and suffering with, you know, I feel for you. I really do. I've done a couple 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreats. There was a center south of Seattle. There's Vipassana meditation retreats all over the world, that it's generally 10 days and you're expected to just watch your breath and scan your body from head to toe while you're breathing for 10 days. They trick you. It's actually 11 days because there's a day 0. But learning how to breathe and just be patient and just sit with myself. Even though I don't have a dedicated meditation practice where I sit quietly for periods of time throughout the day, I do it sometimes, but the breathing, just watching my breath and not trying to stop anything, but just kind of observe it, just be the outside observer, that helps. The breath helps. My guitar, man, I'm so blessed to have found music. You know, music is something that's very special to me. I play my guitars every single day, and if I'm freaking out and having a hard day, I just sit down with my effects pedals and amp and guitars or my acoustic. You know, I got a drum pad, I play piano. If all else fails, I'm beating out something on the table, you know. Music is very, very important to me. And so if this is something that you're dealing with and you feel like, this is permanent, dog, you know, sometimes you bend things that don't want to unbend. If there's any advice I could give, it's, you know, get in where you fit in, you know, really figure out what am I passionate about? What do I like doing? And just get into it and find the environments where you're not going to be viewed as a total freak. You know, like at one point I was going to community college and was like, I'm going to be an accountant, I'll be a CPA, because I wanted to do something normal. This was after I'd been busted by the feds. I got out of treatment for heroin addiction. It's like, what am I going to do, man? Who am I? Just go to college and see what happens. And while I was good at it, that was really good for me because it proved to me that I can go and do something, and if I put myself into it, I'm going to do well. I was getting 4.0s and on the dean's list. But it was hard, man. The feelings of being overwhelmed. And I'll have to read a page multiple times before I really absorb it. Like letters kind of move around and stuff. It makes learning, traditional learning through books and school and having to listen to someone and absorb it all and take notes, that's a little difficult, man. And I didn't have that difficulty as a child in grade school and junior high. That's definitely post all the acid and everything else. So, I've gotten into working in restaurants. Kitchen environments are generally artistic, musical freaks that have had experiences like myself, and you're not looked down upon. It's also a double-edged sword because sometimes the restaurant industry is wrought with drugs and alcohol, and it's not the healthiest thing. But I've been able to find a sense of belonging and be able to work hard and create something that I feel is purposeful. Having some type of purpose. It's like I'm preparing this food from scratch and I'm serving it to somebody, and they're going to have an experience with that. Even if it's not super profound, oh my God, Michelin star restaurant, even a really good sandwich, man, it's going to make your day, right? So I learned that I enjoy cooking, so why don't I just do that and get into that? That does not equal a whole lot of money. That means that I'm living in kind of subjective poverty. But hey, I'm surviving and moving forward. So if this is something you're struggling with, that's advice that I can give, is just get in where you fit in, man. Figure out what's going to work for you. Figure out where you're going to find a community of people that aren't going to look down on you if you're a little bit quirky, a little bit off. And I'm not saying to sell yourself short. You want to go to college and get a degree and get into some type of business, and you do whatever the hell you want, right? But try to be realistic, because I've had to accept that on some level, I'm probably a little bit disabled, man. Like, I've had a couple rounds of college, and it was really difficult for me. I also was working, and, both times I went to college, I was clean. I was not doing drugs. And after a year of taking a bunch of college and the stress that came with that and having to work and da-da-da-da-da, I'd end up relapsing and getting high again, and it would all fall apart. So it's hard to say if that's a direct function of the HPPD, but I think it is, man. It's made some things in life difficult to accomplish. But I'm here, and I love my life, and there are some days that are overwhelming to the point where I'll be at work and have to go into the bathroom and just start crying, or dig my fingernails into my head and just cry it out for a little while. And, all right, man, save face, get back out there and do it, And, I had to go to rehab again like 8 months ago to get off of the Suboxone. And it's been a lifelong struggle, man. And it's something that I think I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life. But, I'm one of the fortunate ones, man, because a lot of my peers that were getting into the same stuff as this, they're either deceased or have completely lost their minds, or totally threw in the towel to having, any type of involvement with regular society. The concept of going out and getting a job and persevering, no, you're going to keep balling out, selling drugs, doing drugs until you get busted, roll on some people, just keep going for as long as you can. And that's not a sustainable lifestyle. One of the pros that I think I've gotten from all of this, the HPPD, and having to learn how to function under these circumstances, is that I persevere and I'm tough. It takes a lot to get me to give up. And I really don't give a fuck what people think. Like, I really don't. You know, there will be situations where I can tell maybe someone doesn't like me all that much, they don't jive with me, or they don't like my ideas, or maybe I say something kind of weird, like, what the hell is this? It's like, I don't fucking care, right? And not in like a negative way, like, I don't care about you, I'll hurt you because I don't care, but not caring what people think. It's like, you haven't died and been reborn on thousands of mics of L, and out here on borrowed time, I have, so I really don't give a fuck what you think about me, man. That's one of the positives. But anyways, yeah, you know, I was hesitant to make this video because I kind of figured that most of the people watching this type of content probably have the HPPD, dog. You know, we're probably all a little bit perma-fried. But figured, well, why not talk about it, you know, because it's real. And it can be really difficult, but I've learned how to live with it, and just get in where you fit in, baby. And much love. Have a good day. Peace, everybody.